Congratulations on making it to the end of section 6 of the complete Android N developer course. You now know how to include and customize maps in your apps, as well as using the user's location and displaying that to the user, centering maps on their location, and building more complex apps such as the Hiker's Watch. You also learned how to add activities to your apps and communicate and transfer between those two activities. And in this video, we'll be putting everything together, building our Memorable Places app. So let's take a look and see what it's going to do. And here it is. So pretty simple. At the start, we've just got a list view with the option to add a new memorable place. And then when we tap on that, it takes us to our second activity, which is a maps activity, which will of course center on the user's location. And it will update automatically if, for example, we change the user's location. So as the user moves around, the map will update with them. And then the user can say they want to save Biggleswade as a memorable place or somewhere within Biggleswade. Then they can long press on there, which is something we haven't done before. So you will need to Google that part. And it will even save the address of that place as well using geocoding. And then if we go back to our memorable places list, you can see we've got our new place saved, and tapping on that will then take us to that new place. So that's it, but there's quite a lot of complications within that. So best of luck, hope it goes well, and of course if you have any problems then just follow along with me afterwards. Go for it. Alright then, hope that went well. I'm going to start, of course, by creating a new project. And we'll call this Memorable Places. Marshmallow as our target. And we're going to have an empty activity for our first activity because that's where our table of places will be. And we'll leave that as main activity. And our first challenge then will be to create our initial table to allow the user to view and add places. So we'll crack on with that. Straight off, I'll begin by adding our list view. Where are we? There it is, in containers. And then I'll remove the text view, drag in the list view, and then give it an ID. All right, so then in the onCreate method, we want to create a list view variable to link to that list view that we've just created. So we'll cast it as a list view and we'll find it by its ID, r.id.listView. Then we'll create our array list, and remember this needs to be a final so we can access it inside the onClickListener method. So we've got an array list of strings. I'll call that places. And this is going to be a new array list. Now, obviously, when the user opens up the app, they won't have any places. So I'm going to add an initial, add a new place. So if they click on that top line, that will add a new place for them, or it will open the map to allow them to add a new place. Then we'll create our array adapter. So new array adapter using this as the context, Android r.layout.simple list item 1 as the layout guide, and then places for the array list to match to our list view. And then we'll take our list view and set the adapter. Array adapter there. Oop, I think that should have a capital V, and I'll make that a capital V as well. And then while we're here, we'll set our on item click listener, which will have a new adapter view dot on item click listener. Like that. And then we use Android Studio to implement the on item click method. And for now, just to make sure that everything's connected up right, we'll create a toast. Just showing the number in the table that was clicked, just to make sure that everything's looking good. All right, so we'll just run that, make sure our table looks correct and that the tapping works. And while that's setting up, we'll add a new activity from the gallery, and this is going to be a Google Maps activity. I'll leave that as the default Maps activity. This is going to be where we allow the user to add new places and view existing places. And you remember we need to add our Google Maps key there. So if you were creating a new key, you would go to that URL just as we did before and create it. But I'm going to reuse the key that I created before, just so I don't have to deal with too many keys. So I'm going to select that with Control-C and then paste it in here with Control-V. Get rid of any spaces and line breaks just in case they cause a problem. And as it's still processing, I'll add the code to main activity to jump to Maps activity when an item is tapped. So we'll create our intent, which is going to be a new intent using the application context. And we want to jump to maps activity.class. And then we want to put an extra bit of data to go with our intent, which I'll call place number, and that's going to be I. And then we're just going to start activity with that intent. So that should jump to our Google Maps activity and give it the information about the place that was tapped on. So over to Google Maps activity. We'll write our code in the onMapReady method. Although for this bit we could put it in onCreate, but mostly we're going to be interacting with the map, so it makes most sense to do it when the map is ready. So again, we're going to create an intent. Which is going to be the intent that got us here. And then we'll create a new toast just as we did before. To display the number that was passed through, which I have to remind myself I called place number. All right, so we should be good to go. I'm just going to get rid of the initial toast over here, as we don't need that anymore. And then let's run our app. And with any luck now, when we tap add a new place on that first list view, it will take us to the map and display what will be a 0 from the fact that we tapped the first item in the list view as a toast. And here we go. So add a new place, and then there we go. So we're jumping over, and you hopefully saw the toast pop up there. Interestingly, it didn't actually display a 0. I suspect that's because it's interpreting this, when it converts it into a string, as having no value, and so it just displayed an empty toast. That's fine, it'll still work for our app. Now of course we can go back easily enough by clicking the back button and then do that again if we want to. So now, next phase is to zoom in on the user's current location. We don't want them to have to scroll around the whole world to find out where they are to add a new place. If they're going to add a new place, it's probably going to be where they are right now. So let's do that over in Maps Activity. And actually, it is the case that the variable that we're passing here is an integer rather than a string. So we should really be using getIntExtra. So let's use that from now on. So intent.getIntExtra. There you go. And you can see this one requires both a string name and a default value. So the string name is going to be what we saved over here. So place number. And we should never need a default value because we'll always get a value, but I'll put a default value of 0 just in case. And then we'll check to see if that's 0. And if it is, then we want to zoom in on the user's location. All right, so flex those wrists. We've done this a few times before now. Let's get typing. So we want a location manager called location manager, and we want a location listener called location listener. We're going to access those from anywhere, which is why they're defined in the class itself. Alt enter there to add the classes for them. And then we'll set up our location manager. So we're going to cast this to location manager, and we're going to get it from this activity.get system service, and the service that we want is context.location service. Next, location listener. It's going to be a new location listener, and it gives us all the methods that we need there. And as I've done before, I'm going to set up a method to process that location. I'll call it center map on location. Like that. And then we'll take our location and we'll generate a lat lung from it, as we've done before. So I'll call it user location And this is going to be a new lat lung created from location.get latitude, comma location.get longitude. And then we'll take our map and first we'll clear all the markers. Then we'll add a new marker with a new set of marker options. And that will be a position, which is our user location, and a title, which will actually vary depending on whether the user is viewing an old location or adding a new one. So I'm going to request that here and then use it there. And then finally, we'll move the camera using camera update factory dot new lat lung zoom, and the lat lung is going to be user location, and the zoom, let's try 6 or maybe 10. See how that looks. Okay, so that's how we update the map. So we'll do that here. Center map on location. The location, of course, is location. And the title, because it's where the user is going to be your location. Okay, of course, we need to get the user's last known location if we can as well, though. And also request location updates. So it's almost second nature to you now. Check to see if they're using a version earlier than Marshmallow. And if they are, we'll just request those location updates using the GPS provider. 00 for time and distance from the last update, and location listener. That has reminded me, yep, in the manifest, when we added the Google Maps activity, that added the find location for us, but always worth checking. Okay, otherwise we need to check to see if we've got permission. So we're checking the permissions of this activity, and we're checking manifest.permission access fine location, and we're checking to see, let's do it the other way around this time, to see if that's equal to package manager dot permission granted, just for a bit of variety. So if it is, that means we have permission. So in fact we can copy and paste this to start getting updates, and we'll also get the last known location, which we'll get from location manager dot get last known location from the location manager GPS provider. And then we want to center map on location using last known location. And again, your location will be our title. All right, we're nearly there. We just have to add the final on request permissions result. And we're going to check, as usual, if grant results.length is greater than 0 and grant results 0 is equal to package manager dot permission granted. Then we know we're good to go, but we also have to check that we actually have the permission. So context compat check self permission, this as the context, and then manifest dot permission dot access find location is equal to package manager dot permission granted. If that's the case, then we can request location updates, which I'll do by grabbing the code from down there. All right, so I think we're good to go. When we jump to the second activity, the maps activity, we should find that it checks for an intent place number of 0, which it should get because we're pressing the first number in the table, first item in the table, and then it will set up the location manager and location listener. If we're in a version of Android before Marshmallow, then it will just start requesting the location updates. Otherwise, it will check to see if we've got permission. And in fact, I've just realized that we don't have the request to ask for permission if we don't have it. So let's just add that in. So activity compatibility dot request permissions, this, and then we create a new array of strings which has a single item in it, which is manifest dot permission dot access find location, and our request code, which is just going to be a 1. Right, so let's try that again. If we look at it at the moment, it worked fine, but it wouldn't actually ask for the location, which is something that's pretty fundamental to getting and updating the location. Right, while that's going, I'll just get rid of the code to center in Sydney, which we don't want. All right, so here we go. Let's tap add a new place. And this should now jump us over to the map. And after asking permission for the device's location, which we'll allow, then it should center on our current location. Slightly hard to tell if it's done that. So let's just update the location. Using the extended controls, and there we go. Wonderful. So that's all looking good. I'm slightly concerned about the fact that it didn't center the map, or didn't appear to center the map on the location. Okay, yep. That's good. So it's requesting location updates when permission is granted, but it's not using the last known location and updating that. So I'm going to add that code in there as well. So now it'll show the right location immediately after the user has given us permission to use their location. Great. So we're now zoomed in on the user's location. What I'm now going to remove is this marker in the middle, because we only want that marker if we're showing them a location that they've already saved. So I'm going to do just a quick check to see if title is equal to your location. In fact, I'll do a check to say if it's not equal to your location, and only then will we add the marker. Alright, so now we need to add that feature I mentioned at the beginning with the long press to add a marker. So this is something we haven't done before, so let's see if we can figure out how to do it. So Android long press add marker map. Something like that should do the trick. Okay, that first result looks pretty promising. I'm going to bypass that, and here we go. That actually looks pretty simple. We set an on-map long-click listener, and then we set an on-map long-click method to add the marker at that point. Okay, so over to our code. Let's get our Google Map and set the long click listener using this. And you can see that gives us an error because this refers to our maps activity, which doesn't have the on-map long click listener that we need. If we scroll up here, we should be able to see the whole code. There we go. So we can now use on-map long click listener if we add it in to the classes that our maps activity implements. And Alt Enter as usual. And now Android Studio very helpfully will implement the methods for on-map long click listener for us. There's only one, on-map long click. There we go. And now, for now, we'll just add our marker. And we've got some code for adding our marker somewhere. There it is. So let's bring this down. So you can see we've got a lat long returned by this method. That will be where they clicked or where they long pressed. So I can use that as my permission, and for the title, for now, I'll put your new memorable place. All right, so let's try that out. We should now be able to long press on the map and it will add a marker with a title of your memorable place, your new memorable place at that location. Let's see it in action. And here we go. So let's add a new place. And that then jumps over to the map with our previous location. So no marker for the moment. So let's say I want to add a marker at Henlo. There we go. And that's our new memorable place. Brilliant. Now that's all good so far, but we want to be a bit cleverer than just adding some random text. We want to get the address of that place if we possibly can. So let's go back over, and when they do the long click, that's when we want to do the geocoding. So let's create a new geocoder. So new geocoder using the application context, and the user's locale. Then again, as we're used to, we'll add a list of addresses, which I'll call list addresses. And we're going to get these from our geocoder using get from location. And the location is of course our lat lung dot latitude and lat lung dot longitude, and we only want run result. And we're going to need a try catch around there. And then we're going to check to see, first off, that list addresses is not null. And then we'll check that there's at least one item in there. We only need one. And then here, I'm going to just get the sub-thoroughfare and the thoroughfare. And as long as the thoroughfare exists, we'll go ahead with this address. If that doesn't, then we'll use something else. So if list addresses dot get 0 dot get thoroughfare is not null, then I'll do another check to see if list addresses get 0 get sub thoroughfare. So if that's not null, then we'll take our address, which I'll define up here as a string. So initially we'll make it an empty string. So if the sub thoroughfare does exist, then we'll add it to our address. And regardless of whether that exists, we'll add the thoroughfare. There we go. And then we want the address. All right, so that will work fine if we get a value. If we don't get a value, then we need some way of identifying this particular location. So I'm going to use the time and date. This is something we haven't got before in Android, so let's have a quick search. I'm going to go for Android and Java get date time. If you have to go for Android get date time, you might end up with a non-technical response. So this looks pretty perfect. Okay, so that's good, but I don't just want the number of seconds. Again, useful, but it'd be nice if someone could tell me how to get the full date. Aha. Okay, yep, this looks perfect. So this is getting it in the format year, year, month, month, date, date, hour, hour, minutes, and seconds. So let's do a check to see if address is still empty, i.e. if we weren't successful with our geocoding. Then let's add those in. If you've got many to choose from, I normally just go for the Android version. Then we'll set... no, you can see I've made a mistake there because I chose one that required Android API level 24, and we're trying to support level 23 here. So let's get rid of simple date format and then add in the other one. And there we go. And I'm going to turn this around slightly. So we've got minutes, minutes, hours, hours. And then I'll leave the year, month and day so that there's hopefully less confusion than there would otherwise be about whether the month comes before the day or the other way around. All right. So let's give that a go. Our next challenge, of course, if this works, is to actually save that item on our app so that it displays in the memorable places and they actually become memorable to the app. And here we go. See, that's updated and it's actually gone straight to this activity. So let's have a look. Excellent. We've got the correct address there. Just try another one. Okay, that one, excellent. So it couldn't get the correct address. So it's created a date and time, although that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think I'll add a little bit of punctuation in there. And I think that should be hours, hours, minutes, minutes. So then it would be 1547 rather than 4715. Okay, so now we need to think about how we're going to save these things. Obviously, we've got our places array list, but we're also going to need to save the actual locations. So we're going to need another array list. And this is going to be an array list of lat lungs, which will be locations. And this is going to be a new array list. And we'll initially add a new lat lung, which is just going to be 0, 0. So that will refer to the supposed location of the add a new place item in our array list. Otherwise, everything will get out of sync. So if we go back over to our maps activity at this point, we don't just want to add a marker, we want to add a location. But of course, the places and locations array lists are in the main activity, and we want to update them from the maps activity. That's not something we've done before, so let's see if we can figure out how to do it. So Android update variable from different activity, perhaps? Something like that. Here we go. How do I get a variable in another activity? So we know how to transfer variables between activities, but that's not quite what we want to do here. We want to update a variable. Aha, here we go. So if we declare them as static variables, then we can access using activity 1, for example, dot, and then the variable name. Great. Let's try that then. So let's change these variable types to static, which means they will be available from anywhere in our app, i.e. from any activity. But you'll notice that we can't define a static variable within the onCreate method. We need to define them in the class itself. So that's fine. Now they are both static variables, so we should be able to access them from here using main activity dot places. And there we go. So now we can use main activity dot places, and we're going to add, and the thing we're going to add is the address of the place. And we're also going to add to locations, the lat lung, which is lat lung. Okay, and I'd quite like to see a quick toast just saying location saved. So it's very clear to the user that that location has been saved for them. So let's give it a try. See if that works as desired. Okay, here we go. So we'll add a new place. That jumps us over to the map, and then long press location saved. If we go back though, it's not on our list. That's because we need to update the table itself. And we can do that, as we've seen before actually, by updating the array adapter. But that does mean that we'll need to be able to access the array adapter from both activities. So let's define it as a static variable, and then we can use main activity dot array adapter and notify dataset changed, and that should then update the array adapter, which will essentially update the list view for us and show the new location. Let's have a look. Okay, so once again, we'll add a new place. And then let's add Letchworth Garden City. And again, it says location saved. Looks good. Click back, and there we go. So it's saved the data on the list view. Excellent. So we're pretty close. There's two things that we need to add really to make the app work properly. The first is to make it so that now when I click on Neville's Green, it takes me to that location. And then the second and final thing is to save these bits of data permanently so that they're there every time the user opens the app. Okay, so let's do the first one first. So when the user enters the maps activity, remember it initially checks to see the place number is 0. So if it is, then it'll do all of that. If not, then we want to center not on the user's location, but on the item that they've just tapped on. So we've actually got some code to do that. We're going to add a marker, just like that on the map. In fact, we should probably clear the map just in case there's any markers on it from previous usage. And then the position we're going to get from main activity dot locations, and then we're going to get, and the number that we're interested in is of course the intent, and then get int extra place number, and then it will default to 0 just in case there isn't one, but we're pretty certain there will be. And then the address is very similar, but we're getting that from main activity dot places dot get, and then again we want to get the place number. So that should add a marker. Then we want to center on the map. And in fact, we'd be much better off just using that method. That's why it was there after all. So let's call center map on location. And the location, of course, is this one. and the title is here. Except of course that we're expecting a location, and this is a lat lung. So we will have to do a little bit of manipulating to convert that. So let's create a location called place location, which is going to be a new location using the usual location manager GPS provider. And then we're going to take our location and set the latitude, and we're going to get that from main activity locations, get that dot latitude, and then something pretty similar for setting the longitude, and then we can just send place location to that method. So that's a little bit messier than I anticipated because we have to convert it from a lat lung to a location, but it gets the job done. Of course, your code may well be leaner than that, in which case congratulations. But let's just check, and we should now be able to save a place and then view that place via the initial list view. So here we go. Because of the way that it's restarted the app, and it hasn't restarted it completely, it's actually saved our old place and then add a new place on, which messes things up slightly, but actually we should be able to then just tap on that and go straight to that location. Super. There we go. So now everything's working as desired. We just need to save everything permanently, which I'm afraid we'll have to wait for the next section, because that is all about permanent data storage. So as always, feel free to Google ahead and see how that's done. But we'll come back and we'll revisit this app at the end of the first video in the next section when we know how to store data permanently. And that, of course, will be our challenge for that video, to see how to add permanent storage to our Memorable Places app. For now, though, congratulations on making it to the end of section 6. We've covered a huge range of ways in which you can use location and maps in your apps. And I hope you're looking forward to section 7, where we're going to be looking at permanent data storage, which will take us toward building our big app at the end of the section of a news reader. I'll see you there.